Good afternoon or good morning from wherever you are joining us in the world. Thank you very much for joining WorkBuzz on our webinar today, which is from Gen Z to baby boomers, crafting effective employee engagement for all ages. Just while everybody's logging in, I thought it might be a little bit of fun to find out if you guys know your age ranges within your organisation. So if you could pop a message in the chat, or if you could pop a message in the Q&A section, one or the other, and let us know if you can, if you know what is your age demographic in your business right now. So let's have a see. Oh, here we go, 20 to 72. That's the first one. Here we go. Yeah, nice spread of ages coming in. Wow. Yep, I think this is thoroughly endorsing our Gen Z to baby boomers theory here. Okay, well, everybody's popping in their generation spreads in the webinar chat. Oh, Joe Matson, you're very good. Look at you with your exact spread and your exact percentages. We love that. So yes, while everybody's popping those in to the chat, I just wanted to say, if anybody's got any questions throughout this webinar, please do drop them into the chat or drop them into the Q&A as you think them. If we can't bring them up at that exact moment in time, we'll come back to them at the very end of the webinar. But without further ado, let me hand over to our speakers today. We've got Ian Barrow, who is our Client Services Director here at WorkBuzz, and we've got Chandni Chauhan, who is one of our Employee Engagement Consultants. So I'll put my teeth back in and I will hand over to Ian and Chandni.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, wherever you are, and or good morning. My name's Ian, as Hayley said, and maybe she should have introduced us as I'm the Gen X of the party today. So I sit right on the cusp between being a baby boomer and a Gen X, but I'm just in the Gen X. And Chandni, obviously, as you can see, is very much a millennial or a Gen Y. So we're going to give a different perspective today, and we'll pick up different bits of this. Hopefully, what we're going to do, we'll have a look at perceived behaviours and differences across generations, and I really want to stress that I don't see, whilst there are differences and there are generalisations across different age groups and different generations, I really see it as a shift in behaviour and a shift in the way we think, rather than differences. Differences to me means problem or clash or whatever it might be, but it's very much a shift in different behaviours across generations, and how do we work with those, and what the work styles and what the different thought processes that we need to go through as leaders, as managers, as organisations, to make sure we engage people effectively at whatever age they are and whatever generation they are, and what factors are at play, and what's driven the thinking of different generations. So we'll have a look at the shifts. We'll look at workplace changes and how those changes in general across different communities and across technology has shaped generations. And what do we need to take into account of what new skills do managers need to effectively manage different generations and pull people together as effective teams. So what's shaped them? What's the needs? We're actually undergoing a real profound shift as we speak. Millennials, so those are people who are born after 1977, have just passed Gen X as the largest segment of the workforce. So at this point in time, we've got 4 generations in the workplace, and with a fifth entering in the next 5 years, who are Gen Alpha. So they will enter the workplace certainly in the next 5 years, if not the next 4 years. And so we've got a range of generations now filling roles right across many organisations. And when you look at something like Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, he's of a younger generation leading a truly global organisation. And then within perhaps the financial sector, you've still got people of the baby boomer generation who are leading organisations. So it's about how and different generations are engaged across organizations, how we engage with these different diverse groups. And critically, where we're going through processes at the moment where many organizations are struggling with recruitment and retention. How do you retain people? What factors do we need to take into account in retaining different people across generations and ultimately recruiting people across generations as well? What do we need to develop, and what skills and what do we need to offer people at different levels? I think there's another factor in play as well, in the sense that the economy is changing, and it has been changing for some time. And lots of things were accelerated by the pandemic, but certainly we're seeing the way people work and their attitudes to work change over time. So the gig economy, for example, and you can see things like Deliveroo and Amazon workers and people working in call centers. That's very much created a gig economy where people perhaps do 2 jobs, even 3 jobs, and work for short periods of time within those organizations and move on. So the traditional sectors helped by technology have changed the way people work. I think the other thing is that there's new and flexible ways of working now. Obviously, we're all working in a more hybrid way if you're kind of white collar employees, and it's more flexible, and perhaps that suits younger generations more than older generations. So you see the drive at the moment from lots of organizations to get people back into the office, and younger generations kind of opposing that and voting with the feet and going to work for organizations that allow them more flexibility in the way they work. There's also a real move from certainly the millennial generation and downwards into being more involved in organizations. They want more purpose, they want more participation, they want values that resonate with themselves. So that's changing the way we as organizations think as well, in terms of recruitment and the way we communicate with employees. So there's real changes at a micro level and a macro level in the way that generations are viewing organizations and the way they want to connect. But what's also changing is the makeup of the workplace. So traditionalists, or some people call them the silent generation, there's probably not a very small percentage, virtually nil of them left in the workplace. And in fact, just an hour ago, I saw on the news that popped up on my phone that Rupert Murdoch has resigned as the chairman of Fox News and Fox International just an hour ago at 92 years old. So you can see that generation of traditionalists is moving out of the workplace. There's probably very few people left. And certainly by 2032, there's going to be 0 of those individuals left in the workplace. Baby boomers, as you can see, they'll be retiring over the next 10 years. Similarly for Gen X are moving out. And what the workplace is going to be made up of is millennials, Gen Z, and Generation Alpha. So they'll represent about 3/4, just over 3/4 of the workplace in 10 years' time. And obviously, from those born 1977 onwards, they were obviously children in the 70s and moving into the 90s. Very much children of the digital age who are used to phones, are used to laptops, are used to computers, are used to that kind of technical way of working. So a completely new generation coming through with different needs and wants, or group of generations coming through. And the other thing that's changing is the kind of length of service and the loyalty, if you like, within organizations. So if you look at traditionalists and baby boomers, people were staying with organizations for longer, and it's very much a case of work here for long enough, you'll get promotion, you move through the organization, you'll move through different roles, and people stuck around in organizations. And even my generation, Gen X, the average length of service is still around 5 years plus. But immediately when you start dropping down into younger generations, millennials, Gen Z at the moment, the average length of service is only around 2.5 years. So within that 2.5 years, as I've already said, the younger generations are looking for involvement. They're looking for the ability to influence change in organizations. They're looking for values. They're looking for the ability to innovate and enhance organizations. and you really have to squeeze that into a very tight time scale if you want to engage with these individuals and get the most out of them. So there's a number of factors, as we said, actually changing the makeup of the world of work. There's a number of factors that were accelerated by the pandemic and this post-pandemic period. And that's created this series, if you like, of interactions with different generations of the workforce that are looking for something different from work. And as I said, in terms of length of time and length of service, it's very much about squeezing as much as you can into those early years of service, because it's the likelihood is the average millennial or the average Gen Z will move on after a shorter period of time than we've seen in the past. However, I think there's a real number of benefits to having different generations in the workplace. Certainly, multiple perspectives. People have different views on the job responsibilities and how we do things, and sharing perspectives across those jobs brings a wide range of views and knowledge and abilities and support. You know, somebody like myself working at WorkBuzz, I've seen quite a lot in the 30 years I've been working in this sector, and Chandni, who's relatively new in the last 5-6 years, hasn't had that experience. So, you know, I can share my experience of what's happened in the past and my knowledge, and she can help me understand more about issues for her age group and people in the workforce of her age group. Problem solving as well. You know, it's really interesting that people bring different perspectives to solving problems, you know, in terms of life experience and how people interact with others, and challenges and conflict. So, you know, the younger people in our organisation work will certainly keep me on my toes, you know, asking me lots of questions and kind of picking my brains. But it's also about me learning from them and learning from how they solve problems in a different way and think about problems in a different way. Maybe, you know, somebody of my generation is more methodical of how we go through things. Our certainly younger generations in WorkBuzz are much more quicker in uncovering problems and working through challenges. Mentoring opportunities. I think there's fantastic benefits from learning and mentoring from each other, and that's cross-generational and reverse mentoring as well. So, you know, that I have lots of people who I lean on in WorkBuzz who I talk to about AI, for example, you know, and newer technologies that are coming through. Again, learning on younger people in the organisations to understand that. So you learn from each other in organisations, and that's what really drives people on. Knowledge transfer. If each generation offers and prepares the business to meet future leadership needs, so bringing those people through is important, and the focus then becomes more on in-house promotion and less from recruitment from outside, so people can see the benefit of staying for longer with organisations and the awareness of strengths that we bring to organisations. And also unique relationships, you know, with co-workers can help me employees' emotional needs. You know, when you have different generations in the workforce, it's more like a family structure within the organisation, and you can lean on each other in different ways to sustain your emotional benefits and it's to sustain your emotional and well-being within an organisation, and that contributes to job satisfaction and mental health, well-being, and a number of other benefits. However, in saying that, there's challenges. So we all, at different stages in our lives, want to be communicated in different ways. So there's going to be different communication styles and preference, and intonation and tone, and different things that different generations want, expect, and need from communication. So it's important that whether we're communicating virtually across Zoom or Teams, that we do that in the right way and involve people in the right way. But it's also just as important in face-to-face communications that we understand the best way to communicate with different people. And that's not just a generational thing, but in the context of today, that's what that's about. Negative stereotypes. There's a danger, obviously, that we sit here and we say, oh yes, there are differences, there's behavioural differences, and there's behavioural shifts. But you don't want to stereotype everybody with those kind of generalizations, if you like. So you're a millennial, so you will behave like this. That's not always the case. People don't always follow the norms. So we got to avoid kind of stereotyping and generalizing the way people may act or the way people may think and what they may do. And painting everybody with that same brush. It's not always true. So the preconceived notions about how people fit into different generations, yes, we should be aware of it, and there are generalizations, but not everybody fits the same mold. So ensuring that you don't do that to people and say, you're a millennial, you will behave and think like this, or you're a Gen Z, you behave like that, or indeed at the other end, you're a baby boomer, so you're stuck in a rut and won't change or challenge. So it's very much about understanding that those stereotypes shouldn't be really reinforced. It's much more about understanding people at different points in time. And varying employee expectations, as we said, there's a real desire for people to have more involvement in organisations. There's a real desire in terms of expectation and different expectations from their employment, and that's changed over time. And certainly ways that people do the job, the ways that they expect to be evaluated, the ways they expect it to be rewarded, the flexibility they expect in roles is changing over time. And that's not just about again, millennial generation or Gen Z. It's true of us all to different extents, but certainly younger generations have different expectation levels than other people in the workplace, and that's important to understand as well. What's shaped younger generations? Because that's key. Bearing in mind that the millennials, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha are going to be 3/4 of the workforce in the next 10 years. What shaped those generations are the key differences? I think first of all, without a shadow of a doubt, the mobile and tech savvy. I was thinking before today, when I was preparing this, when Chanley and I were preparing this deck, the first time I actually saw a PC or used a computer, I was 23 years old, which is interesting when I think of my children, both of whom had a phone in the hand, probably from the age of 5 or something like that. So the younger generations have grown up with technology, the tech savvy. And just to give you a flavour of that, some stats here, 96% of 12 to 17-year-olds now on smartphones, and 75% of users age 18 to 30 can't remember the last time their phone wasn't actually sat next to them, either when they were asleep or awake, which is unbelievable. And that falls nicely into the way my daughter thinks. It doesn't leave her hand when she's awake, and it doesn't leave her side when she's asleep. So they can't recall that. So it's always on. It's an always on tool, if you like, whether it be a social tool or whether it be a work tool. It kind of sits there. I think the other change for the generations that are coming through is that smartphones, tablets, the internet have been forms of learning in school. There's an expectation, and they learn from it. They entertain themselves with technology, but also it's the case that there's an expectation that will also happen in the workplace. So that really impacts on the way people learn and develop within the workplace. They need that technology to do that. And there's an expectation that the technology will be there. And a couple of stranger facts, just while I was researching the top bits, and I'm throwing these in for no reason than other they make me smile. 48% of online shoppers in the UK buy stuff while they're in bed. 15% do so while they're sat in the toilet. And 20% admitted to shopping online whilst drinking or dining out, which is probably the most dangerous one, because obviously after a few drinks, you end up with some purchases that you probably wouldn't have made by the time you get home or wake up in the morning with a hangover. So it just illustrates really that, again, technology doesn't leave people wherever they go. And I think the other thing to note as well is that the interaction that recent generations have are mainly online in their lives. So the social animals, they're online social animals, whether it be Facebook or YouTube, or whether it be TikTok or X, as it's called now, Twitter, or any of the other social online platforms. You know, they're social animals in that sense. But the key thing is the younger generations perhaps are losing some of those social interactions, those personal ones, human social interactions. And there's a question mark there whether when people enter the workplace and at those ages, whether they've lost some of that, the ability to speak to people and work with people, and whether that's part of the onboarding and training that people need to go through. And as you can see, 66% of people would check out a store after learning the friend had checked it out. So in terms of branding and in terms of how we think about interaction with customers, that's key. 100 hours of video is uploaded to YouTube every minute, and over 40 million pictures are uploaded to Instagram every day. So that interaction in terms of being social animals is really important. And again, if you think of things internally within the organization, like Slack or some of the intranets that we have, or Yammer, or whatever it may be that we have within our organizations, that's what younger generation is going to be looking for: social interaction within the organization through online tools. And I just want to touch on Gen Alpha. The Gen Alpha generation who are coming through, remember they're from 2012 to 2024, so they're coming through in the next couple of years in terms of the workforce. They're very, very different, actually. They're a different generation than what's seen before. They're almost part of a global unintentional experiment, if you like, where they've had screens in front of them from the very youngest years, and they act as pacifiers, they act as entertainers, they're educational aids, and that's in their key formative years. So, I'm sure we've all been on a plane or a train, and we saw very, very young children being given an iPad to sit in front of to watch, a cartoon or Peppa Pig or whatever the latest cartoon is nowadays, just to keep them quiet. And in that sense, it's being used as a pacifier, an entertainer, and obviously when they're getting into school, most children use iPads or whatever it might be in school. I guess some of the outcomes of that are shorter attention spans, the gamification of education. So as education is gamified through online technology, perhaps that's going to be the expectation going forward in terms of development and training once they get into the workplace. And so there becomes questions then for us as organizations about how do we gamify development, how do we gamify career advancement, how do we gamify training within the organization. And I've seen examples of that in the past, but obviously it could be the norm, if you like, going forward. I think the other things that we're seeing as well: increased digital literacy, and as I said, the potential for almost impaired social formation. If they're used to forming social groups and social networks online, how do they do that in the real world within the workplace, and when they need to work within a team, perhaps? I guess the generation Alpha were started being born around 2010, and through to 2012. It's the year the iPad was launched, Instagram was created, the app was the word of the years, and I wish I created this word, by the way. So they've become screenagers, and the source is there at the bottom. But I love that term. Perhaps it's a bit derogatory for and then as they get older, perhaps these individuals will find it quite a derogatory term. But it kind of described exactly who they are, the generation of the screen coming through. I'll pass over to Channy and let her talk about the millennials and the younger generation, what she sees coming through.
Thank you, Ian. So I just wanted to touch on some of those key shifts, I guess. And being a millennial myself, I remember the whole rise of technology starting off in sort of primary school and things moving very, very quickly since then. I started using a computer probably in primary school very, very early on. And then I remember getting a home PC as well, and then the sort of rise of new ways of communicating as well. So whilst I didn't have a mobile phone when I was in primary school, I was on the way there. So constantly on MSN Messenger, things like MySpace, and obviously things like Facebook developing as well. Obviously the flip phone, so revolutionary. Really remember that. So some great stuff there, and a lot of nostalgia, I think, from millennials from that point of view. I think when we think about sort of work and roles I've done in the past, in terms of what I've looked for, it's always about that sort of healthy balance between work and personal life. For me, I think personal time is super important, especially things like well-being. It's super important to me to find that balance where I'm being looked after, but I'm also getting that good balance with work as well. With things like purpose and how I sort of relate back to work as well, it's something I value very much. So things like personal development and making sure that that aligns with my organization values as well. So for me, my purpose involves helping people and organizations to make a difference. And this really aligns with the WorkBuzz purpose as well. So that's something that's super important to me. And that is something that aligned with me really well when I first started working for WorkBuzz. We think about sort of Gen Z now going a bit further than my sort of generation. They are that digital generation. They've not really known a world without smartphones and, of course, things like social media. And some of the general trends we often see with Gen Zers is that they're quite tech savvy, but they also share those values around being unique and super creative as well. In terms of things like social and environmental issues, they have very high expectations for this and do place a high importance around this as well. So that's some of the things that you might want to think about putting a bit of importance on within your organizations when you do come to recruit some of those younger generations. Can I have the next slide, please? In terms of looking at what we do look for in an ideal employer in terms of millennials and Gen Z, what we do know is that in terms of millennials, and myself speaking on behalf of millennials, we do value that work-life balance and that well-being when evaluating those job opportunities, almost as much as compensation and benefits. In terms of prioritizing career growth and well-being as well. So when it comes to career growth, it's more about that personal development. So that's super important. And also that differentiates from some of those older generations who focus a little bit less on that career development, also remote work, again, relating that back to that well-being piece and remote flexible working as well. When we think about millennials and Gen Z as a whole, we both do tend to seek employers that are sort of aligned with our values, again, being committed to things like social environmental responsibility, really prioritizing that work-life balance, career growth, inclusivity, innovation, and also that transparency within an organization around, what's going on, and the organization being able to communicate effectively with us as well. And I think this is super important when you're coming to think about how you plan your things like people strategy for the future. And eventually, when you think about millennials and Gen Z, they will make up a large majority of your workforce. It is something to really bear in mind for the future. And have the next slide, please, Ian. So what we have been seeing in some of our WorkBuzz surveys, a massive trend actually from some of our younger age groups, we're seeing well-being and things like development coming out really strongly. So in some of our insights where we can see some of those reasons for leaving, people really want to be able to grow as a person in the role that they're in. And when we look at things like work-life balance and well-being, it's all about that balance being correct. Reading some of those open comments from our surveys, from some of our recent clients, some of these younger generations, they want to travel, they want to move roles, seek those alternative career paths as well. And then just from this, we're then also sort of seeing that tenure for roles sitting around more of the 18 months to 2 year mark before employees then start to move on. In terms of well-being, again, feeling safe in the workplace is a massive thing. Psychological safety has a lot to do with how the younger population feel today and how safe they feel within the workplace as well. Feeling safe to speak up in their roles is making sure that, as an organization, you consider those safe spaces and also those different avenues for staff to raise concerns. And again, when we think about feeling safe, it's also about that respect piece. It's always about having that two-way street. We've also seen things like technology in organizations. So one thing I've noticed as well in previous roles, when we've got systems and processes in place, if they are slightly outdated, it can be quite frustrating. So when we've looked at some of our data within our surveys, some of those comments, some of those reasons for leaving are actually what does the data show you? What are the systems that you've got in place? Are they outdated, or are they sort of moving with the time? So that's something that's of super importance to some of those younger generations as well, where you find those processes quite frustrating and you just want to do what you want to do in terms of your role, in an easy way where it's super efficient with the technology that you've got within the organization. In terms of having so much at our fingertips, there's also sometimes that aspect of a larger reward expectation too. And I know we've sort of seen that with the current job market, but also with the cost of living and just what's been going on within the world at the moment. Obviously, interest rates are super high. People around my age buying houses, we're seeing rents going up. So there's always going to be that slight expectation around reward and being able to afford things in this economy as well. I think that's everything from me, Ian. I think it's back to you.
Cool.
Thank you.
Fantastic overview there from obviously a different generation. Many of the things that frustrate millennials and younger people, I guess. When I was entering the workforce 30 plus years ago now, it was a case of shut up and put up and just get on with it. So it's a very different world we live in now. I just want to focus a bit on what the challenges for the millennials, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha over the next few years. What will work look like, and what are the key challenges? And I think there's 5 big uncertainties. There's obviously lots of other uncertainties around the world, global economies, and the impact of the war in the Ukraine, and a number of other factors. But what are the key uncertainties that are going to shape the future of work? I think the first thing is AI. I don't think anybody's truly sure at the moment how far AI is going to go and where it's going to be honest. And we're obviously seeing even people who developed AI now saying, hey, maybe we should be putting a halt on its development just so we're aware of what's happening and we don't end up with a kind of Terminator type scenario, if you're aware of the Terminator films, where technology takes over the planet. So we just need to really take stock on where AI is going. We know that it's a key factor in some industries at the minute. So if you get an insurance quote now online, it never touches a human, and you end up with a quote for your car insurance popping out the other end after answering a number of questions. So AI plays a part in all of our lives, and it's a factor in most customer service environments. But we don't know just how far that's going to go in terms of the workplace. So certainly those younger generations are going to be faced with a big challenge around AI in the coming years. I think the other thing as well is that jobs are going to change, and there's going to be things happening out there which we just don't know about at the minute. Technology changes the way we construct jobs and the way we build jobs. And this is a UK insurer that I've worked with in the past, and this was from 2021. And at that point in time, they were predicting that 47% of jobs they had in the organisation would probably disappear in the next 25 years. It wasn't the fact that the overall number of people working in the organisation would decrease by half. It was they thought they would still have the same number of people, but just the point that they would be doing different jobs. And some of those jobs they were recruiting people for, which they didn't know if they actually sat down with those managers and said, what will this job look like in 10 years' time? They couldn't actually say at that point. They were recruiting people for the future with skills to be able to adapt for the future, but not necessarily knowing where they will be in 10, 25 years' time. So we know that within organizations, certainly technological driven organizations as well, that the jobs that people are doing now will not be the same in a number of years. 25 years perhaps is too far, the pace of technology. It might be even in the next 10 years or even 5 years for that matter. So we know that jobs are going to change, and we have to respond to that. So again, this younger generation coming into the world of work, and being technologically savvy and having the ability to be nimble and change is really important. And I think linked to that, really standing still as organisations isn't an option. We've got to evolve. We've got to evolve as organisations and move with the times and move with technology and recruit people with skills who can move with that technology as well. If you don't, you'll get left behind, and people will recruit the best out there. They will recruit people with the right skills, and you will struggle to recruit. So organisations have to keep evolving. More of the same isn't an option. And I think the other thing is we've got a different approach to leadership in terms of, as Chanley's outlined earlier, you know, the things we're seeing coming through from younger generations in surveys. They don't just want managing now in terms of the job role. They don't just want to be helped to, you know, manufacture widgets and turn them out and hit the numbers and all the rest of it. They're looking for much more from managers, the line managers and managers and leaders generally across organisations. So they're looking for help with the mental health and well-being, and they're looking for leaders and managers to understand the struggle and understand where they're at through regular conversations. They're looking for people to equip them with the tools and technology and to help them move through the role. They're looking for trust. They're not looking for micromanaging. They're looking for people who can support them and empower them. They're looking for people who are going to reinforce the value and the culture of the organisation, do what they say they will, who actually embody the values on a day-to-day basis. They're looking for recognition. They're looking for affirmation that they're doing the right things. So again, they're looking for managers who recognise what they do within the role. They're looking for managers who recognise them when they go beyond the role, and they're looking for that affirmation all the time on a regular basis. So there's a number of key factors within that. So the role of the people manager is no longer just a role about managing the team in its mass. It's about managing individuals. It's about understanding who individuals are, whatever generation they are. But it's also about being a lot more nurturing, a lot more supportive, a lot more focus on affirmation and recognition, rather than just the aspects of the job, i.e., turning out widgets or ensuring a service happens or whatever it might be. And I think it's been driven partly by generations, but also by you know, it's probably if there's a small number of good things that came out of the pandemic, this is probably one of them. Organisations in the past went through a phase of, we think this is the strategy, we think this is the way we're going to go do things, and now we'll do it. So they jump from the outer circles here from one to the other. What we found in the pandemic was that people were being asked more about how they were as individuals. How's your well-being? Are you well before vaccination came along? Are you okay? How are you coping at home in lockdown? How does it feel working here? So we become as organisations much more human, much more kind of touchy-feely in that sense in terms of employees themselves. So now most organisations go through a process of, here's the strategy, this is where we think we're heading. I wonder how colleagues feel about that. So we'll survey them, we'll listen to them, we'll go to them and check that out, and then we'll do it after we get results from surveying and listening to people. Excuse me, and most people are going through that kind of process. I think the other thing is it won't just be about the organisation. So in the past, you know, most organisations have just put out job adverts and job roles, and this is what we want, and people apply for those and they come in. I think going forward, certainly for the younger generations, it won't just be about the skills the organisation needs. It could be also about the skills that the future workforce can bring and what they want to do. So we're just starting to see now aspects of that where people are working for organisations who are rowing back slightly on the ability to work at home versus work in the office. And we saw lots of organisations starting to move towards, you know, 1 day to 2 days to 3 days in the office, and people voting with their feet on that. You know, it's not what I want. I want to continue working at home for 2 days and come into the office for 3. And I'll vote with my feet. If you're going to drag me back into the office, I will vote with my feet and go elsewhere. But it's also about the skills that people bring. It's also about the skills that younger people will want to develop in organizations. So it's not just necessarily about we need this skill as an organization. It could be about the individual then balancing that off against what they want to develop and where they want to head to into the future. So it'll be a kind of shared coming together, if you like, in terms of what the organization needs versus what the prospective employee wants. And I think the other thing is the nature of it will change the way of work, and we'll have to think different about how we present work to younger generations. So we, as I said, it's almost a given now that you have to present a flexible work environment. We have to be able to customize work environments for individuals, not for groups of people. It's going to be a place where we share information. It's going to be a place where we collaborate, you know, and that might be online, it might be virtually, it might be in person. It's going to be a place, work's going to be a place where there's social justice and transparency, and organizations work in an environmentally friendly way and a socially acceptable way. And it's going to be shifts from a knowledge worker to a learning worker. So we may be that we have to reframe work as a set of learning problems as opposed to execution problems, where, you know, we have to do this, we have to make so many widgets by the end of the day, and we execute that. But if we turn that into a challenge, into an adventure almost, about, you know, if we learn and we innovate as we go, perhaps we can do it quicker, perhaps we can do it more efficiently. And in that way, it deepens learning, it reduces fear about making mistakes because we're trying new things, and it ultimately increases retention because it makes work that much more interesting and challenging for everybody. So we've talked a lot about shifts. We've talked a lot about, as I said, I didn't want to use the word differences, but the perceived behavioural differences and the perceived wants and needs of younger generations. So how do we lead and manage the multi-generational workforce? What should we be doing differently, or what should we be doing as standard actually within the workplace? I think there's 10 key things. I think the first is that we have to identify preferred management styles for different generations. We have to make sure that we're not applying a kind of one-size-fits-all leadership style that works for teams. It's about getting to know individuals on a personal level. It's about getting to know individuals and what they want, their skill sets, their motivation, and what do they want out of the workplace. That's really key. So identify individual preferred management styles. Don't treat people as a group that you can manage in the same way. I think the other thing that people are looking for is more regular check-ins and open and honest communication. So once you do those check-ins, you know, allow that to be a safe space where people can raise views, they can raise concerns, they can take necessary steps to make change. It's not just about now having that check-in and it not being a safe space. You know, as I said, when I first started work, it was very much be seen and not heard. You know, this is what I want you to do, get on with it, and then we'll judge you against that. Now people need that safe space, and that's true of us all, whatever age we are. People want that. So those safe space environments are important for those regular check-ins. I think the other thing is we've mentioned different communication styles, and that's different for different people. And as we said, the growth of virtual communication channels like Teams and Zoom and Slack and whatever else throughout the pandemic period were absolutely key to keeping us all afloat as organisations. But we need to then factor in that older generations are keen on face-to-face communication. They're keen on meeting people, and so should younger people be as well, because obviously that increases the social interaction. So bear in mind that, you know, not everybody wants or wants online communication all of the time. So mix it up as well, so there's a different forms of communication, and you're spreading that across your teams and the different people within your teams. And be a leader for all. You know, there's I guess there's a temptation, if you like, that if you've got a larger proportion of millennials within your teams, particularly in some of the workforces where millennials are generated to. I think of Amazon off the top of my head. You know, don't be tempted to just say, well, everybody, the majority are of that generation or that age, so I'll lead like this or I'll communicate like this. Just remember, you know, you have the spread of generations, so it's very much about inclusive decision making. It's very much around different styles of leadership. It's very much, again, around creating teamwork within an organization and utilizing everybody's skills and abilities. One of the other things, I guess, is that when we're attracting people into the organization, the employee value proposition, the EVP, is really important, really, really important. So we have to advertise our organizations. We have to create the brand of our organization so it appeals to everybody. So it's not just about, hey, there's great flexibility here and there's you know, and there's great technology, and it's all about this, and it's all about how we work together. It's about ensuring that we're appealing to different generations so that we get the best possible candidates we can coming through to work for us in the organization. So how do we advertise ourselves? How do we create that EVP? How do we make sure that we're pulling people from different generations and we're collecting and gathering skills that we need for our organization? Feedback. I know this is, I'm probably talking to the converted here in terms of doing that. And obviously, it's what we at WorkBuzz do, you know, in terms of facilitating employee listening. But it's really, really critical that people do that. And it's only by doing that and segmenting your surveys by age will you get to understand the desires, the needs, the wants, the challenges of different generations in your workplace. Otherwise, you're guessing, in essence, what the key challenges and the key issues are. So regular feedback is really key. And whether you do that through a survey process, which is obviously the easiest way to do it, or whether you do it through one-to-ones or smaller group sessions or whatever you do, really, really important to collect regular feedback so that you have your finger on the pulse of your organization or your team so that you know how they're thinking, you know what the challenges are, you know how people feel about each other and how they're working with each other. I think there's obviously different work styles and needs, and key to that, as Chani alluded to earlier, a work-life balance and flexibility preferences across generations. You know, and as you move through life, I guess, you know, you're single, and then you're in a relationship, perhaps, and then perhaps you have children, and your needs, your work-life balance needs change, and then you go past that as children grow up, and perhaps you have more time again for work. Whatever about it, the journey through life and working life is really important. So those working arrangements in terms of different generations is important as well. So in a post-pandemic world, the expectation of flexible working is a must. It's not a kind of choice anymore for organizations. You have to provide that or people will walk with their feet. But it's also about understanding the personal work-life balance and the personal flexibility that people are looking for as well. Learning and upskilling, really important. In terms of drivers of engagement, we see that, you know, whether not just career development, but skill development and knowledge development is really key to keeping people. So important that as a leader, as a manager, that you understand what different generations want and different skills that they need to develop. So for me in the organization, me personally, at WorkBuzz, it might be around technology where I have to really work hard at that because I came late to the party in terms of age. For others in our workplace, it might be different skills around problem solving or how they work within a team or whatever it might be. So it's understanding what different people within different teams need in terms of skill development and development going forward. And I think linked to that, there's different learning styles. As I alluded to earlier, you know, the generation alpha that are coming through, they're used to sitting in front of a screen already, and that's the way they learn, that's the way they entertain, that's the way they pacify themselves. So that's the way they read news and collect information. So if Generation Alpha bring that into the workplace, and your learning vehicles and training vehicles within the workplace are not suited to that, and they don't cater for that, and they're not built in that way, you potentially got a problem in the future where the learning vehicles will maybe need to be adapted so that it's online learning and it's learning in a different way. Whereas somebody of my age might still prefer face-to-face learning with a tutor or in a group or whatever it might be. So giving people the option to learn in different ways and develop learning in different ways, it's going to give people a headache in training and development departments going forward, but certainly it's something that we need to think about carefully. And as I said earlier, avoid stereotypes. Nobody likes to be stereotyped in any shape or form. So whilst, and all the way through this, I really want to stress that what we're seeing is shifts in behavior, shifts in values, shifts in what we're seeing. They're not differences. They're not differences between people. They're just a different way of thinking and doing things and behaving, and a different lifestyle for that matter as well. So it's really about understanding the team dynamics. It's about understanding team members as individuals, and not really looking at those generational groups. So just trying to pull it together. I'm just conscious of time. I think we need to acknowledge that there are perceived differences, but we also need to kind of don't sweat them too hard. Don't dwell on the differences. The key thing as leaders and managers is that we move teams forward as a single unit, and we focus on the skills, the strengths, the abilities, the knowledge, the aptitude of different people in the team, whatever generation they are, and we take them forward as individuals. So mentoring becomes really key across generations. Mixing it up, social gatherings are fantastic. We're again at WorkBuzz we go for nights out and we have social events, and it's great to see people from different generations stood in different groups, chatting, sitting with each other, and all the rest of it. So that's important that you do that and encourage that. Regular listening, I've mentioned that already. So ensure you know what's happening within your team, and sharing knowledge as well, ensuring that the tech savvy younger generation educate upwards as much as the older generation educate downwards. I guess the key starting point is the similarities. At the end of the day, we're all human, no matter what age you are. We're all driven by a number of different factors. So we're driven by reward, for the work we do, for the people we work with, and the belief that we're contributing to society in some way, I guess. So that's regardless of what generation you are, we're driven by that. We're all looking for, satisfaction. We're all looking for recognition. We're all looking to learn and be rewarded in all of our roles. And we all want to be trusted, valued, and respected. And at the heart of it, we want to enjoy what we do. So all of those similarities are identical, regardless of whatever generation you sat in or you were born into. So we know that we're all cut from the same cloth in many ways, and there's a number of satisfiers and motivators that we have to hit regardless of generation. It just might be that you're doing it in different ways for different people. So we may learn in a different way. We may be rewarded in different ways. We may take satisfaction from different things in terms of our jobs. We all want to be communicated with in different ways, but they're all similar. We're all similar in that way. So finally, my 4 big takeaways, I guess, are, foster cross-generational mentorship, get people to work with each other and talk to each other, embrace the concept of reverse mentoring, upwards and downwards, and people sharing the knowledge and the skills and bridge those generation gaps. That's really key. That's the first really big takeaway. I think the second thing is cultivate empathy and flexibility. Understand and appreciate the strengths and motivations of different generations. So it's not about differences, it's strengths, it's unique motivations of each generation, and adapt your leadership style to run with those, if you like, for different team members. So some people might want an arm around the shoulder. Some people might just want that complete freedom to charge ahead. Which is it? How do you do that? And what do they need from that aspect? Cultivate learning opportunities as well. Invest in professional development initiatives that cater for different needs. Training, mentorship, growth opportunities, develop skills so that everybody feels valued. But as we said again, do that in a way that suits the different generations, that suits the individuals, and what they're looking for and what they're used to, and so that they'll learn in the best way and take things on in the best way. And finally, encourage multi-generational collaboration. There's nothing better than when you have a unique challenge, a special project or whatever we want to call it, and you build a team of different generations within that to solve that problem, or they go through problem solving. In my experience, it's fantastic because you get different perspectives that I wouldn't think of. You get people speaking up from their own upbringing and from their own generation and from what they know, and I chip in with stuff as well. So it's fantastic when we have those sessions at WorkBuzz, that those different perspectives and ideas and experiences and knowledge of the world comes through when we've got a unique problem to solve. And you find that you go off on tangents and you learn something different, and you go off on a tangent and find something new, and you create brilliant ideas, and you innovate quicker by creating multi-generational teams. So really think about that hard. When you're putting teams together to solve challenges or to innovate or create new things, what does that makeup of that team look like? Is it a mix of people, or have you pulled people from one generation? How does that work? And I just want to end with a quote from Simon Sinek. I love Simon Sinek, so I'm assuming most of you have heard of Simon Sinek and saw some of his TED Talks or whatever. But he talks about effective generational leadership is not about age. It's not about the generations. It's exactly what we've been talking about. It's about understanding, empowering, and inspiring people of all generations to work collaboratively towards a common vision. It's not about the generational differences. It's about harnessing those different thoughts. It's about harnessing that different knowledge and taking it forward. So thank you for listening today. I will hand it back over to Hayley, and she'll just wrap the session up.
Thank you very much, Ian. Thanks, Chandni, for some great insights there. If anybody does have any questions or comments they'd like to drop into the chat, you've got a minute or two just to do that. Just as a sort of follow-up from this webinar, look out for an email from Emily or Fiona next week. They'll be sharing the recording, slides, any additional resources. So one of the things I think, Ian, you've brought up a few times in the session is about safe spaces. And a few weeks ago, Ian did do us a webinar all about safe spaces. So we'll share that link with you if you didn't get a chance to catch that one. But coming up next month, I say next month, it's only a few days away, is employee engagement in a hybrid workplace. So we've got an award-winning law firm, TLT, coming in to talk about how they put in flexible working policies whilst they're in a growth scenario. So that's taking place on the 10th of October. And if you want to join that in true technology style, there's a QR code on the screen. So if you'd like to scan that now, you can go straight to the registration page. But if anybody has any further questions they've not had a chance to ask, or it comes up whilst they're walking the dog this evening, as does with me, you could drop us a message at hello@workbuzz.com. We'll pass those on to Ian and Chandni. They'll come back to you directly. Or if anybody wants to know any more about the WorkBuzz platform, then please do drop us a line. But apart from that, have a great rest of your Thursday and the rest of the week. Thanks so much, everybody.